The wedding I had dreamed of for so long turned into a nightmare. Someone had sabotaged me, leaving me confined to a wheelchair. My husband, Vincent Grant, a once bright star, chose to step away from the spotlight to care for me, to help me heal. And then, after what felt like an eternity, I felt it, a faint, almost imperceptible sensation in my legs. I was overjoyed, desperate to share the news with him, but as I approached his study, I saw his computer screen still glowing. The chat window was open, and the words on the screen made my heart stop. Honey, I'm already 3 months pregnant. Even if she finds out the truth, it won't change anything. Why did you have to go so far as to break her legs? Vincent's reply was cold and calculated. It was the only way to keep her at home. The pregnancy is still unstable, and I can't risk any accidents. I won't let her hurt you or our child. Tears blurred my vision, and a chilling numbness spread through my chest. I had thought I had everything, a loving husband, a perfect life, but in an instant, I realized the man I loved was the monster who had destroyed me. How is she today? Vincent's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The butler hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. She's been following the routine, taking her meds, resting, but the doctor called earlier. If she misses this treatment window, she might never walk again. Mr. Grant, perhaps we should tell her. No, Vincent cut him off sharply. If she recovers, I won't have time for Emily. She's only 3 months along, and this is a critical time for us. I've sacrificed too much for this baby. I can't afford any distractions. The butler opened his mouth to protest, but Vincent stifled a yawn. Dismissing him. It's late. Go rest. We'll deal with this later. Outside the door, I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. I had come here, eager to share my progress, hoping he'd be as thrilled as I was. But his cold, detached words shattered that hope. Vincent, how could you? If you didn't want to be with me, you could have just left. Why did you have to destroy me? Leave me broken and humiliated? I was about to burst in, to demand answers, when the sound of a video call stopped me in my tracks. Vincent's face lit up as he answered. His voice soft and warm. I'm home. Where do you want to go later? I couldn't hear the other person's voice, but it was clearly a woman, her tone playful and sweet. Vincent chuckled, his smile widening. Anything you want. Your wish is my command. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I remembered when he used to speak to me like that, back when we were first together. He was always so patient, so gentle. I used to tease him about it, asking why he never got angry with me. Vincent had smiled, his eyes full of adoration. Because you're my everything. Having you is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I could never be mad at you. What about when we have kids? I'd asked, half joking. Will you still spoil me then? He'd laughed, pinching my cheek. Of course. I'll spoil you and our kids both. Back then, I was his world. But now, just 2 years later, he was a stranger, cold, calculating, and cruel. What had happened to the man I loved? Tears spilled uncontrollably down my cheeks, my shoulders shaking as I tried to stifle the sobs threatening to erupt. Memories of happier times, our laughter, his tender words, flashed through my mind like a cruel slideshow, now tainted by the cold, hard truth. I felt disoriented, unable to distinguish between the past I'd cherished and the nightmare I was living. My hands trembled as I maneuvered the wheelchair, and I accidentally bumped into a vase by the door, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound immediately caught Vincent's attention. He ended the call abruptly and rushed over, his face a mix of surprise and unease when he saw me. Serena, how long have you been here? He asked. His voice tensed that I couldn't speak. My vision blurred with tears, and I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. The pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. Vincent, misreading my silence, pulled me into a tight embrace. Don't cry, Serena, he murmured, his voice soft but hollow. I'm here. Even if you never walk again, I'll always be by your side. His words, meant to comfort, only fueled my anger. He thought this was about my legs, about my despair over being confined to a wheelchair. He had no idea I'd just overheard his chilling conversation, that I knew the truth about what he'd done, what he was still doing that I bit my lip hard. The metallic taste of blood grounding me. I forced myself to lean into him. To play the part of the broken wife he thought I was. You need to accept this. Serena. He said gently, pulling back to look at me. Even if you can't walk, I'll protect you. You'll always have me. His words were like salt in a wound. He'd been subtly pushing me to give up hope. To resign myself to this life. And I'd believed him, clung to him as my only lifeline. Now, the realization of his betrayal was suffocating, making it hard to breathe. Vincent didn't notice the storm raging inside me. He straightened, his tone shifting to one of casual dismissal. Serena, we have guests coming over for a meeting. Behave yourself. Okay, don't interrupt. I stared at him, my heart turning to ice. Guests, more like his mistress. He destroyed my legs to keep me trapped at home while he carried on his affair. I'd been drowning in tears, and he'd been out there. Laughing with her. The doorbell rang, and a woman's voice, sweet and syrupy, drifted in. Vincent, is this how you manage your household? Your wife doesn't even greet guests. I remained silent, my eyes locked on Vincent, waiting to see how he'd handle this. He shot me a look of irritation. Serena, say hello. We have company. Emily Johnson, the woman from the video call, swept into the room, clutching a small dog to her chest. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me, and her lips curled into a sneer. Serena, are you deaf? I'm a guest here. Is this how you treat people? Maybe Vincent should just kick you out. Vincent's expression darkened. Emily, that's enough, he said sharply. Emily pouted, her lower lip trembling as she turned to him. Vincent, why are you yelling? You're scaring me. Then, with a dismissive glance at me, she added, sorry, Ms. Taylor, guess I was a little rude. My bad. Her apology was insincere, dripping with condescension. She knew Vincent would side with her, and she was right. Serena, Emily apologized. Vincent said, his tone softening. Let it go. Why don't you let the butler take you out for some air? Emily and I have things to discuss. Without waiting for my response, he ushered Emily upstairs. Their footsteps hurried and eager. Emily giggled, leaning in close to whisper something I wasn't meant to hear. I've missed you so much. Vincent's breathing hitched, and though he tried to maintain his composure, his steps quickened. They didn't even bother to close the door fully, and soon, muffled moans drifted down the stairs. Vincent, slow down, Emily teased. What if she sees us? Don't worry about her, Vincent replied. His voice husky. She's stuck in that wheelchair. She's not coming up here. Their words cut deeper than any knife. Vincent, the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted, was now laughing with her, touching her, while I sat broken and betrayed. Their voices faded as they moved further upstairs. I wanted to get up, to follow and confront them, but Emily's little dog blocked my path. It stared at me with the same disdain as its owner, barking aggressively. I ignored it, turning away, but the dog lunged at me, sinking its teeth into my thigh. Pain shot through me, and I cried out. Shoving the dog away, it snarled, ready to attack again, and in a moment of panic, I kicked it as hard as I could. The dog yelped, crashing into the corner of a table before collapsing, whimpering in pain that I froze, unsure of what to do. Blood trickled from its mouth, and I hesitated, guilt and fear warring inside me. But before I could check on the dog, a strong hand shoved me, sending me tumbling out of my wheelchair. Before I could even get up, another kick landed on my side, knocking the breath out of me. I groaned, crumpling to the floor. When I looked up, Vincent was glaring at me, his face twisted with rage. Serena, how could you be so cruel? It's just a dog. It's not what you think, I started, but Emily cut me off, cradling her dog and looking at me with tearful eyes. Serena, if I've done something to upset you, just say it. Why take it out on Snowy? If you hate me that much, I'll stay out of your life. Just leave my dog alone. Vincent's expression softened as he comforted her, his hand gently rubbing her back. Then he turned to me, his voice cold and harsh. Apologize, Serena. Now. Emily sniffled, adding, she should slap herself too. That's the only way I'll forgive her. Vincent didn't hesitate. You heard her. Do it. I stared at him in disbelief. The Vincent I once knew would have never treated me like this. He used to cherish me, making time for me no matter how busy he was. When his career took off, his manager suggested he keep me a secret, but Vincent refused. He'd proudly declared to the media, "Serena, you're everything to me. I'd give up anything but you." Now, the man who'd once put me above everything else was standing there, siding with her, and her dog, against me. All his promises of love and support felt like lies. It attacked me first. I said, my voice trembling, "Why should I apologize?" Vincent's face darkened, and without a word, he grabbed me, dragging me toward the pool. My heart raced as I realized what he was about to do. "Vincent, please. You know I can't." He didn't listen. He shoved me onto the pool float, his expression cold and unfeeling. "Stay here and think about what you've done. When you're ready to apologize, I'll let you out." "No, Vincent, let me down," I screamed, my voice shaking with terror. Panic surged through me as I clung to the pool float, my body trembling uncontrollably. I wrapped my arms around myself, staring desperately at the empty poolside. My mind raced with images of Vincent and that woman, their laughter echoing in my head that I thought back to 6 months ago, when I'd first been injured. I'd been broken, lost in a fog of despair. Vincent had been my rock, doing everything he could to cheer me up, to help me find my way back to myself. He'd been so tender, so patient. "Serena," he'd said, "no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. I'll never let you suffer." But now, he was the one causing my suffering. Then I remembered the strange phone call Vincent had taken a few days ago. "Make sure everything's handled. No loose ends. This is on me, no one else." At the time, I'd thought it was just work. Now, it sent chills down my spine. My accident hadn't been an accident at all. It had been Vincent's plan that I forced myself to calm down, paddling the float toward the edge of the pool. If I remembered correctly, there was a hidden side gate in the bushes on the east side of the pool, a gate they'd installed for landscaping deliveries. With all my strength, I dragged myself out of the water and onto the ground. Thankfully, the gate was still there. I grabbed the handle, pulling myself up and trying to open it. When it finally swung open, I felt like I'd been given a second chance. I held back my tears, found a hiding spot, and used my watch to send my location to my brother, Daniel Taylor. It didn't take long for Daniel to find me. "Serena, what are you doing here? Don't worry. I'll take you home," he said, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't speak, tears welling up in my eyes. Daniel's face softened with pity, but there was a flicker of anger in his eyes too. He gently wiped my tears and said, "It's okay. I'm here now. No one's going to hurt you." He helped me into his car, then turned to me with a serious expression. "Serena, are you sure? Do you really want to come home with me?" I thought about everything I'd been through, the pain and betrayal, and nodded firmly. "I'm sure. I just want to get out of here." There was a time when I would have done anything for Vincent. Now, all I wanted was to escape him. Meanwhile, Vincent was at the hospital with Emily, waiting for her checkup. When the doctor confirmed that her baby was healthy, Vincent finally relaxed. Emily cradled her dog, Snowy, stroking its head as she cried. "She's so cruel. How could she hurt Snowy right in front of us? If we hadn't been there, who knows what she would have done." Snowy, who had been so aggressive earlier, now whimpered pitifully in her arms, playing the victim. Seeing this, Vincent's disgust for me only grew. He called the butler, his voice sharp. "Keep an eye on her. No one lets her out until I say so." The butler hesitated, then said nervously, "Actually, Mrs. Grant escaped through the side gate." Vincent's brow furrowed. "She escaped. She can't walk, so she couldn't have gone far. Should I go look for her?" Vincent laughed coldly. "No need. She's helpless. When she realizes she can't survive on her own, she'll come crawling back." Serena had no friends, no one to turn to. She'd always been attached to him, like a shadow. Vincent was sure she'd return, but by the next day, there was still no sign of me. Vincent started to panic. He called the butler again. "Did she take anything with her when she left?" The butler confirmed. "No, she left with nothing, not even her phone." Vincent's unease grew. He drove straight to Daniel's house and rang the doorbell. No one answered. He kept ringing, but the house remained silent. Just as he was about to climb the fence, Emily called. "Honey, where are you? I'm not feeling well tonight. I want you here with me and the baby. Can you come over?" Emily's voice was sweet and pleading. Like a kitten begging for attention, Vincent's heart softened. Thinking about how much Emily had been through lately, he quickly forgot about me and agreed. "Of course. I'll be right there." Emily giggled, her voice dripping with affection. "I knew you'd come through. You're the best, Vincent." Vincent shook his head, smiling as he got back in the car and drove off. On the other side of town, I was settling into Daniel's home, surrounded by the familiar comforts I'd once taken for granted. As I looked around, a mix of emotions washed over me: relief, sadness, and a lingering sense of betrayal. I tried to keep my composure, not wanting Daniel to see how broken I was, but the tears came anyway, streaming down my face. For years, my world had revolved around Vincent. Even my own brother, who'd always been there for me, had taken a back seat in my life. Daniel had respected my relationship, keeping his distance to avoid intruding on what he thought was my happiness. But now, seeing me like this, his eyes filled with pain and concern. "Serena," he said softly, "if that guy can't give you the happiness you deserve, then leave him. I'll protect you like I used to." His words broke me. All the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness I'd been holding in came rushing out. I sobbed uncontrollably, clinging to him as if he were the only anchor in my storm. "Daniel, I don't want to be apart from you anymore." Once I'd calmed down, Daniel gently asked me what had happened. I didn't hold back. I told him everything: Vincent's manipulation, his affair, how he'd orchestrated my accident to keep me trapped. As I spoke, Daniel's face darkened with anger. By the time I finished, he was seething. "That bastard," he exploded, his voice trembling with rage. "Who does he think he is? He wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. Daniel was right. When Vincent and I had first met, he was a struggling nobody, barely scraping by. Daniel had warned me back then. "You can suffer with him now, but what happens when he makes it big? Will he still treat you the same? Don't trust promises so easily." But I hadn't listened. I'd been so sure of Vincent, so convinced that as long as we were together, I could handle anything. I'd been blind, and now I was paying the price. "I was a fool," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I'm done with him. Let him rot." Daniel's expression softened. "We'll get through this," he said. "Once I wrap up a few things, we'll go abroad. I'll find the best doctors to treat your legs, and we'll take some time to heal, both physically and mentally." I nodded, trusting him completely. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Vincent's life was falling apart. Ever since I'd disappeared, everything had gone wrong. Long-term sponsors were dropping him, scandals were breaking left and right, and his career was on the brink of collapse. He knew it had to be Daniel's doing, so he tried to reach out, bringing gifts and apologies, only to find our home empty and abandoned. Panic set in as he realized he had no idea where we'd gone. He rushed to Daniel's company, but the response he got there was the same. "The company was transferred a while ago," the security guard told him. "Haven't seen Mr. Taylor in weeks. Your family, don't you know where he is?" Vincent ignored the guard's question, his mind racing. He'd lost me, and now it seemed he'd lost Daniel's support too. The weight of it all was crushing him. "Serena's a cripple," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Who else would want her?" The guard raised an eyebrow. "Cripple, Ms. Taylor? Nah, she was here just the other day, looking full of life. Here, I'll show you the footage." Vincent froze as the guard pulled up the security camera recordings. There I was on the screen, walking, laughing, completely healed. Vincent's face paled as he leaned in, his eyes wide with disbelief. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice shaking. He couldn't accept the fact that I was standing again. He rushed to the hospital, frantically flipping through my medical records and questioning the doctor. "Ms. Taylor hasn't been here recently," the doctor said. "I'm not sure about the condition of her legs, But generally, her nerves would only react if she's been stimulated externally. Mr. Grant, has Ms. Taylor experienced any kind of trauma? Vincent's mind flashed back to the pool, to the moment he'd thrown me in. Thinking it would punish me, make me obedient. Could that have been the trigger? I don't believe it, Vincent muttered, still in denial. Serena can't be walking. She just can't. He spent days searching for me, scouring every place he thought I might be, even the restaurants Daniel used to frequent. But he found nothing. It was as if I'd vanished without a trace. Finally, it hit him. He'd lost me for good, exhausted from days of searching. Vincent stumbled into his house in the early hours of the morning. The sight that greeted him made his blood boil. Emily was there, wearing my favorite pajamas. Posing in front of the mirror, Vincent stormed over, shoving her to the ground. His eyes were wild with rage. Who said you could wear her clothes? Do you have no shame? How dare you touch her things? Emily was stunned, scrambling to her feet. She tried to calm him, leaning into his chest with a pout. Vincent, you're scaring me and the baby. Can't we just talk? Why are you yelling at me? Once, her voice had been music to his ears. Now, it grated on his nerves. He pushed her away, his voice cold and sharp. Change out of those clothes and get out of this house. And don't come back unless I say so. What? Emily's face turned red with anger. Are you serious? You told me this was my home too, that I could come and go as I please. Get out. Vincent's voice was low, but it carried a threat that made Emily flinch. She changed out of the pajamas, tears streaming down her face. And left without another word. Vincent picked up the pajamas, running his fingers over the fabric. These were her favorite. He whispered to himself. She never went anywhere without them. How could she just leave them behind? These pajamas had been a gift from him on our first anniversary. They weren't expensive, but I'd treasured them, carrying them with me everywhere. How could I have left them so easily? Emily called, her voice trembling with anger. Wake up, Vincent. She's gone. You wanted her in that wheelchair so she wouldn't get in the way of our happiness. Now that she's left, you should be celebrating. Why are you acting like you've lost everything? Shut up, Vincent roared, his entire body shaking. I never wanted her to leave. If you hadn't used the pregnancy to manipulate me, none of this would have happened. It was true. Without Emily's interference, Vincent might never have sunk so low. He'd hurt the person he loved most, leaving her broken and miserable. The smile he'd once adored had vanished, replaced by endless sadness. Vincent finally realized how wrong he'd been. You shouldn't have used the pregnancy against me, he shouted into the phone. You shouldn't have ruined our lives. If it weren't for you, I'd be happy, happier than I've ever been. Emily's voice was sharp, cutting through his guilt. And you're blameless. If you hadn't been so weak, I never would have gotten my foot in the door. This is on you, Vincent. Don't try to pin it all on me. Her words struck a nerve, leaving Vincent speechless. He staggered to the bed, collapsing onto it. The room was exactly as I'd left it, a painful reminder of what he'd lost. Every corner of the house held memories of our happiness, and the weight of it all crushed him. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, his voice barely a whisper. Serena, where are you? Please come back. I miss you so much. Vincent's relentless search for me continued, but he hit one dead end after another. I'd warned my friends in advance, so no matter how much he pressed, all he got was the same response. We don't know where she is. Daniel kept me updated on Vincent's desperate attempts to find me, but I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a hollow indifference. Meanwhile, I ran into Clara, Vincent's assistant, who happened to be an alumna of my alma mater. I'd helped her land her job, and she'd always been grateful when she saw me standing tall and radiant. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Serena, you're walking again, she gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. Yes, I replied simply, brushing it off. But Clara was overcome with emotion. I always said good people get their rewards. I'm so happy for you. I knew her joy was genuine. After a brief catch-up, I got straight to the point. Clara, I need you to help me contact Vincent. I want a divorce. She froze, staring at me in shock. Serena, this isn't a joke, is it? You and Mr. Grant were always so close. Last year, he even publicly declared his love for you during an interview. I scoffed. It was all just a performance. A facade. To make Clara understand. I laid out the entire story, Vincent's betrayal, the manipulation, the accident. When I finished, I looked her in the eye and said, Clara, there's no going back for us. Vincent will start a new family, have his own child. We're done. Clara's face darkened with anger. Serena, I had no idea Mr. Grant was such a monster. Don't worry, I'll handle this. You've done so much for me. It's my turn to help you. Clara was clever. She waited until Vincent was drunk, then slipped the divorce papers in front of him. He'd been drowning his sorrows in alcohol, too out of it to even read what he was signing. As soon as he scrawled his name, Clara brought the papers to me. Serena, she said firmly, a woman with your worth doesn't belong in a place like that. I know you'll find your happiness. I smiled, grateful for her support. I handed the paperwork to my lawyer, who began the process. It didn't take long to uncover evidence of Vincent's infidelity. He and Emily had been together for over a year. But what shocked me most was discovering that Vincent had tried to transfer our assets into his name during our first year of marriage. If it hadn't been for Daniel's intervention, I would have been left with nothing. The thought sent a chill down my spine. If he'd succeeded, I would have been abandoned, helpless, and alone. That I pushed down my anger and instructed my lawyer to proceed. At the same time, I began investigating the sabotage on our wedding day. Vincent probably never imagined I'd look into it. He thought I was too naive, too blinded by love. But his carelessness made it easy to find evidence. I compiled everything and handed it over to the police. Meanwhile, Emily was at Vincent's house, tidying up. Since you fired the housekeeper, this place has been a mess, she complained. Vincent ignored her, his tone cold and detached. I've arranged for you to go abroad for the birth. The hospital is ready, and the money is taken care of. After that, don't contact me again. Emily panicked, her voice trembling. Vincent, what are you saying? I don't understand. Before she could finish, the butler rushed in, whispering something in Vincent's ear. His expression shifted from shock to fury. Are you sure? He demanded. The butler nodded. I've confirmed it, sir. The child, it's not yours. Vincent's face turned red with rage. He glared at Emily, his voice low and dangerous. You lied to me. Emily's face went pale as she realized Vincent had actually investigated her. She could see the storm brewing in his eyes, and her hands trembled as she reached out to grab his sleeve. But Vincent yanked his arm away, his expression dark and unyielding. Vincent, please, Emily sobbed, her voice breaking. I just wanted to give the baby a stable home. Please, forgive me. I'll do anything. You're disgusting. Vincent spat, his voice dripping with venom. You lied to me, ruined my marriage, and now you have the audacity to beg for forgiveness. You're nothing but a manipulative bitch. His rage boiled over, and he lashed out, kicking Emily hard enough to send her stumbling backward. You're the one who deserves to be crippled. You took Serena from me. Vincent was about to strike her again when the police burst in, restraining him. He was arrested on charges of conspiracy to harm me, leaving Emily alone in the house, weeping uncontrollably. As the officers led him away, Vincent turned to Emily one last time, his voice cold and final. Take your bastard and get out of my life. I never want to see you again. Emily collapsed to the floor, her heart shattered. She knew there was no coming back from this. As she tried to stand, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen. She looked down to see blood soaking through her clothes, pooling around her. She staggered forward, leaving a trail of crimson, before collapsing in a heap. Vincent, now in police custody, was a broken man. Regret consumed him as he realized the magnitude of his mistakes. He shouldn't have given in to temptation, shouldn't have let Emily into his life, and certainly shouldn't have orchestrated the accident that left me crippled. If he had been faithful, if he had been stronger, none of this would have happened. In his cell, Vincent confessed to everything. When my lawyer presented him with the divorce papers, he refused to sign unless he could see me one last time. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I walked into the visitation room, Vincent looked nothing like the man I once knew. His eyes widened in disbelief. Serena. Is it really you? Am I dreaming? Serena. I'm so sorry. Please. Forgive me. I know I messed up. But I'll do anything to make it right. He pleaded. His voice trembling. He even began slapping himself. Desperate to show his remorse, but I felt nothing. Did you think about this moment when you had my legs broken? I asked coldly. Vincent had no answer. Back then, all he cared about was keeping me trapped at home. Oblivious to his affair and powerless to leave. I sighed. Exhausted by it all. Let's just end this. We need to let each other go. Finally, Vincent signed the divorce papers. He knew there was no way to undo what he'd done. No way to keep me. The day the divorce was finalized, I received shocking news. Vincent had taken his own life in prison. I didn't cry, but a deep sadness settled over me. It wasn't just for Vincent, it was for the love we'd once shared, for the man he used to be, and for the life we could have had. Vincent. From here on out, our paths will never cross again. We'll go our separate ways, leaving the past behind.